If you find fun and humor offensive, you might want to skip this episode. You've been warned. Three castaways are shipwrecked on a desert island where, unfortunately, there is a tribe of cannibals. The tribe captures the three castaways and tells them that they're going to be cooked alive in a big pot of boiling water unless they go and do the task that they're required. So, of course, the three castaways say yes. The leader of the tribe tells them that they each have to go off and find a dozen of whatever kind of fruit they want to find and bring it back to him. So, of course, immediately the three scatter and they go to find fruit. The first castaway returns with a dozen apples, and the leader of the tribe says, "Okay, you have to put all dozen apples up your butt without making a grimace or any other face. If you do that, you're free. Otherwise, we're throwing you in that pot and we're lighting the fire." So the person says, "Oh man." And he starts working on it and he gets about 5 or 6 into it and then he just grimaces and can't stand it anymore. So the leader of the tribe says, "Throw him in the pot." So he goes in the pot of water. The second castaway returns with a dozen cherries. The leader of the tribe tells him the same thing and the second castaway thinks, "Oh, I got this," right? So he starts doing it and he gets about 8 cherries up his butt and then all of a sudden he just starts cracking up. And the leader of the tribe says, "Throw him in the pot with the first castaway." So the two are sitting there. The first castaway turns to the second and says, "Dude, how did you possibly fail? You had cherries, you could easily have done it." And the second one said, "Yeah, I was definitely gonna do it, but I looked up when I was putting the cherries up my butt and I saw the third castaway returning with a dozen pineapples." And for those of you interested in investing, check out WeBull, an amazing platform for buying and selling stocks, and now cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin, Dogecoin, and others. Open an account and get a free stock valued at up to $200, and fund your account and get another free stock valued at up to $1,600. Check out the link in the description and help the channel at the same time. Hey y'all, it's Dr. Know-It-All. So that little joke at the beginning teaches me a couple things. Number one, I am not a comedian because that took an awful lot of takes to get that out. Normally I can tell it in a social situation, no problem, but something about talking to a camera that makes it a lot more difficult. So I'm definitely not a comedian, so don't hold me to the humor of that thing. But secondly, that particular joke has a whole bunch of pieces of what makes a joke really important. Number one is the rule of threes. Rule of threes is very, very important to jokes and also to storytelling. In my day job at the university, I teach script writing as one of the classes I teach, and of course I always talk about threes. There's 3 acts in a screenplay. Jokes are told in groups of 3. Beats of a story are often told in groups of 3, etc., etc. In fact, I was recently watching Thor: God of Love and Thunder, or whatever the title of that movie is, but anyway, the recent Thor movie, and I saw a scene where Natalie Portman was doing something and she went off once, and I turned to Misinformation, my wife, and I kind of whispered, I was like, "Watch, she's going to come back, and the third time she'll actually accept help." I think that's what it was. It was like Thor asked her if she needed help. She said no. Then she went off and did something, and then she said no again, and then the third time she said yes. So you kind of come to expect that kind of stuff in a well-written screenplay. But it's also super important to the structure of a joke. Generally speaking, a longer joke, obviously there are one-liner jokes that you just kind of say one line and that's all you need. But in a longer joke, you often utilize what a lot of people think is biological in human beings. We love patterns, but we also love pattern disruption. So doing something once doesn't really set a pattern, but doing it twice sets a pattern. So right in the joke, it's the fruit, it's the doing stuff with the fruit, etc. You set it up, you repeat the pattern so everybody knows what the pattern is, and then the third time you disrupt the pattern, and that's the joke. The punchline is something where you have an expectation of what's going to happen, but then the story or the joke or the punchline veers off from that, and the more it veers off from that, the funnier it is. There is also often an element of offense that goes along with humor, and it can often be offensive to yourself or something. There's a sense of us and them or antagonism or something like that that's also at the root of jokes. A lot of jokes are actually really, really cruel to people, and often, the hardest thing is to learn to laugh at yourself. So it's difficult to have a joke that's told at your own expense, as I'm sure you know from experiences in your own life. People, when they make fun of you at your expense, it's difficult, but it's also important to learn to laugh at yourself. I debated a lot whether to put a trigger warning on this episode. I decided to, partially in a little bit of humor, but also in a fit of pique. I think that people are often very thin-skinned these days, and that we all need to get a little bit tougher about laughing at ourselves as well as just life in general. Life in general can be humorous. It's okay for it to be. And I'm going to say one of the major aspects of humor that I think is really underrated is I think it's associated with genius and disruptive thought. And the reason why is that a joke is basically a disruptive thought, right? You set something up and you go a different direction than people expect. You can think about the sort of standard path of life as like you go to elementary school, you go to high school, you go to college, you get a job, you work your job for 30 years, you retire, right? There's kind of this straight line thing. It can be a very satisfying life, and that's perfectly fine. And there's a lot of people who do that. In fact, most of society does that. But if you truly want to disrupt the world and make a change in the world, you need to think differently than that. You need to take chances in your life. You need to take chances in your career. You need to take chances in the way you think about things, right? I mean, how do you develop a new product if all you can think of is the same thing that everybody else has done? I don't know if it's apocryphal or not, but Henry Ford is supposed to have said, if you asked the public what they wanted, they would have said faster horses. And that's got a kernel of truth in it, whether or not he actually said that. The idea is that people are thinking along a direction. They're like, oh, we've had horses for thousands of years. That's how we get around. That's transportation. That's the way things work. And what we want is we want to improve a horse. We're going in this direction. We're following this linear path. What it requires to make a disruptive change in the world is to get off that path, is to say, no, let's forget about horses. Let's do something else. Let's consumerize automobiles instead, and then horses won't be necessary anymore. So that's the kind of disruptive change I'm talking about. And in my mind, that ability to disrupt is often associated with humor. And that's where we get back to Elon Musk and his amazing ability to not only invent and think about things outside the box. Oh gosh, I hate that term. But anyway, the kind of outside the box thinking, and his ability to think about disrupting industries even when they're basically impossible. I mean, the space industry and the automobile industry are two undisruptible industries, and yet he somehow managed to do that, right? And also all the other stuff that he's been working on too, software, hardware, etc. But what I'm saying here is that Elon Musk's sense of humor is associated with his ability to think disruptively. It's that ability to think in a nonlinear fashion, to take kind of a step change. Instead of just going like this, to go whoop and move to the side and think about something from a different perspective and work at it that way. And that's why I get very upset, particularly on Twitter, because that's the way most of us know Elon Musk. And who knows, it could be a very sad day for all of us because Elon hasn't tweeted since the entire debacle about his purchase of Twitter has fallen through. So I hope he continues on with Twitter, because it would be a very great loss to all of us who appreciate insights into his brain. But anyway, putting that aside, his humor is on display in Twitter. And I gather from books and other reports, friends of his, that Elon has quite the cutting sense of humor in person as well. That it's a very important part of his personality. And people who are offended or who say Elon's a silly child or all of these things, and why are you wasting time and talking about how you tweet on the toilet and all of that kind of stuff, like they question the purpose and the efficacy of that from somebody who is a CEO and is supposed to be an adult. And I say it's exactly because he sometimes behaves like a teenager and a goofball that he actually is able to disrupt industries. That, in my mind, is the main important thing to Elon Musk. He's able to move from a linear path and jump aside and look at the same problem from a different angle. People often say, in fact, he says first principles thinking, right? Success is one of the possible outcomes. But he's able to tear a problem down and come at it from a different direction than everybody else has. It's much easier mentally and physically and everything else and career-wise and all of that stuff to just follow a path that everybody else has done and not deviate from that path. But it's much more interesting, I hope you would agree with me, to deviate from that, to jump outside and look around and take a chance sometimes and see what the world is like from a different angle. And a lot of that comes down to humor. And yeah, he has a kind of a goofy sense of humor and all of that, but then again, he's kind of a nerdy kind of guy. He admittedly has Asperger's, so he's going to have a somewhat different sense of humor than the rest of the world, and maybe that's really important. Again, his oddball sense of humor is probably related to his ability to be disruptive. I think a sense of humor is important, period, to be disruptive. But maybe that oddball sense of humor, that really left field sense of humor, is the way that he disrupts things even more than a lot of people can. So anyway, the point of this is, next time Elon on Twitter or whatever social media medium he decides to take on next tweets out a silly joke or a meme or something like that, look at it as part of his personality and a really, really important one. It's not a flaw, it's a feature. I think that's an important way to look at this. His sense of humor is actually a feature of Elon Musk, and it's really an important part of the package that is Elon Musk. And if you appreciate all of the disruption and all of the new technology and all of the cool stuff that Elon Musk is working on in his companies, then you should really embrace that sense of humor. All right, I hope you enjoyed this episode and found it fun and thought-provoking. Probably not all that funny, sorry. If I was better at telling jokes, I would have thrown a few more jokes in here. Anyway, if you enjoyed the episode, please do like it so other people can find it. And of course, consider subscribing for more of this kind of content. As always, a huge shout out to my patrons on Patreon. Thank you all so much for your support and for the humor. We actually tell some interesting jokes and really, really geeky, nerdy stuff on Discord. So if you want to join the team and see the jokes and all of that stuff and maybe groan at them instead of laughing at them, just check out the link in the description. And if you're interested in a whole bunch of really cool merch, check out our merch store. Link is in the description. We have TeslaBot t-shirts, the Tesla meme t-shirt, Success is a Possible Outcome, 4680 battery cells. All of that stuff is on t-shirts, mugs, tumblers, and on. So check it out. And for those of you interested in investing, check out WeBull, an amazing platform for buying and selling stocks, and now cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin, Dogecoin, and others. Open an account and get a free stock valued at up to $200, and fund your account and get another free stock valued at up to $1,600. Check out the link in the description and help the channel at the same time. Thank you. And finally, don't forget we are both Tesla and Amazon affiliates. If you look in the description, you can see how going shopping for a solar roof, a Powerwall, or anything on Amazon helps out the channel. In the meantime, I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.